So, hello everyone, and thank you very much for coming. Thanks, Sarah, for the introduction. As you said, I'm curator of the University of Salford Art Collection. And a little bit of context as to why we're here. We're hosting 2 artist residencies at the moment with Energy House 2.0 Research Lab. And both are in collaboration with Open Eye Gallery and also Castlefield Gallery, who are also represented here tonight. And generously supported by the Friends of Energy House too. I need to say that. You can quote me on that, Rich. The first residency with Mishka started in January last year, and the second with Emily started in the summer. So they're both obviously in different stages of the process, but we thought it'd be really great to be able to bring them together to talk about where we're up to at the moment. So we're here today as Mishka's work is on display here as part of the Look Lab. And I suppose what we're going to do is really sort of explore the different approaches to artists and scientists working together, hopefully. We will take questions at the end, but if you've got a burning question as we're going through, please do shout out. But firstly, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves, so as we might as well go in the order we're sitting. So, Mishka?
Just quickly.
Just quickly.
Yeah, I'm Mishka. Hi.
I'm Richard.
I'm Emily.
Well, that was easy. It's going to be one of those in conversations, is it? So, what we're going to do is, I think the best place to start actually is with the Energy House facility. And Richard, I'm going to ask you to explain what Energy House 2 is to those that might not know. And we have got some slides, which, oh, hang on, I should have done that one. There we go.
Okay.
Can you see those?
Excellent. So have we got one of each kind of facility and stuff? Yeah, we got.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a few slides. Sorry.
Okay.
I meant to show you beforehand.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Richard. I'm Technical Director of Energy House Labs, and I'm a professor in the energy performance of buildings. What we do over on the other side in Manchester is we do a lot of building performance examination. And how we do that is we have houses within chambers. So we've currently got 2 sets of chambers. This was our first one. So this was one called Energy House, and we started this 13 years ago. So I opened Energy House a long time ago, it seems. And this was our first foray into kind of building performance. And this is a Coronation Street terrace, basically. It's a solid brick wall, end terrace with a building next to it, but it stands in a huge environmental chamber, not dissimilar in shape and size to the kind of room that we're in now, and colour actually. It's a big, bright white chamber that we can do lots of different stuff in. So we can control the wind, the rain, the sunshine, snow, and also temperature. So we go down to minus 12 and up to plus 30 degrees. So in here, we look at how we can improve our existing building stock. So as I drive from kind of Rochdale over to Liverpool today, I've probably driven past 50, 60, 70,000 of buildings that are just exactly the same as this. It's about 20% of the UK's building stock looks something similar to this. Really hard to treat, really difficult. But to put it in a chamber was a really risky project for us. But it's paid off very, very well. It's booked up for 12 months in advance. It's the only one still of its kind on the planet, and it just goes from strength to strength. The reason for that is because buildings like this are very difficult to treat, very difficult and expensive to get working right in terms of energy performance and thermal comfort, and very expensive to get that project complete throughout the entire UK, if you like. So it's a big problem, and that's what that building is aimed to solve.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, this is Z House. So this was done by Barratt Housing. So this was our kind of second test project. So this is the first mass-built low-carbon house aimed at the future home standard, which will be coming in 2025, which basically says that all our buildings should be zero carbon ready. I don't think that we are ready for this kind of building yet, but house builders are certainly getting ready for this kind of building. And yeah, that's a very low carbon house built by a mass house builder. This is Energy House 2. This was my idea for my sins, and it was a big leap to go from Energy House 1 right the way through to this, which is a £16 million huge black box with 2 massive chambers in it that can fit two full-built houses in each one, two detached houses in each chamber. So we have our first two there. So that's one on the left is built by Barrett's, working with a big product manufacturer called Saint-Gobain, and the one on the right is built by Bellway, a large housing developer. So again, in there, we can make it windy, rainy, snowy, as you can see there.
And you'd want the snow pictures.
Yeah. So we can have all the elements as we need them. Okay, so it allows us to examine buildings not only from the UK but from all around the planet. So with the systems that we have in there, we can cover about 95% of the populated land mass of the planet. So anywhere where people live, North Pole, South Pole, we're not too interested in, we can simulate those conditions. So we can test how a building performs now, how it might perform in line with different elements of climate change, and how it might transform when we kind of move it to different places around the planet as well. Again, there's only one in the world that we can do this. So yeah, that's kind of what we do.
And I suppose it's important to say that this isn't the first time that we've collaborated. In 2021, we piloted an artist in residence programme with Energy House 1 with McCoy Wynne, who are over there. And I don't know, Richard, is there anything else you want to say about that and why you were keen to develop further residencies?
Yeah, I think it's not natural. It's not natural for building physicists to be drawn towards the arts, from my previous knowledge anyway, and I don't see it happening a lot. I think the first experience was down at Castlefield Gallery, and Gas was having a problem with his heating. Yeah. And I think that's how we kind of got talking, because one part of the gallery was really cold, and we put some infrared things in, and we did some kind of interesting stuff. So that was our first kind of introduction, and it did get us chatting about how we could do different stuff. And then as it progressed to different artists in residence, and I'd say that all of this has been, well, a lot of it has been funded by charity that we have, which large companies donate to helping with the arts and helping people who are not in a position to take up education and different groups of ethnicities that don't get involved in things. So we have a nice charity that kind of backs us to do all this stuff. But yeah, I think it's as stressful when I started for the artists to work with me than it was for me to work with the artists. And they're sat here, so I'll be careful what I say. But I'm sure that when we first met, we kind of didn't know what we were going to do. And it was a bit strange. So you've got an artist and a scientist meeting, and they're not just meeting, but they're also meeting in this weird place, which is this environmental chamber, and you've got all this other weird stuff going on inside, like it's raining at times and it's freezing cold, and then we're doing things like ripping the house to pieces and kind of sticking sensors everywhere and things like that. Now, luckily, Steph and Steve loved that, and they took to it like a duck to water and documented how we do things really, really well. And they see things, as do all the artists, really outside of my view. You know, so they'll come in and capture something, usually my messy cables, and portray it in a way that many more people can understand, rather than me just kind of stood in front of an audience talking about insulation. So that's kind of why I do it, is because we do some interesting stuff, but they can make it more interesting. But hopefully, I think the reason they might do it is because what we're looking at is quite interesting, both in terms of climate change and these kind of weird places and weird things that we do. But I'm taking word out of their mouths, so I'll be conscious of that.
I think it's also about reaching different audiences. I think that was one of the key things behind it, wasn't it? I mean, you've said about you can give academic papers, but actually through this sort of work, you're reaching much broader audiences, which is, I think, what we did with the work with McCoy Wynne.
Yeah, no one is interested in academic papers outside of my world. If an alien landed on the planet and I had to explain the academic process to them, I publish something, then someone has to pay to read it, but I like them to read it, but I won't give it free and things like that. Well, everything's open access that we do anyway now. But what I would say is, it's a very limited view of what we do, and to have people that see things different and portray it different to different audiences, it brings a lot more to what we do, and we're very glad of it, actually. Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I like about working with you is your openness to working in collaboration, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, that's something we might touch on a little bit later about how you collaborate as a scientist with other scientists, but then also how you collaborate with artists, because collaboration is really at the key, sort of the heart of this project. I mean, clearly we're collaborating with OpenEye, we're collaborating with Castlefield Gallery as well. And we really thought that collaboration was important across both residencies. We wanted to do 2 residencies. We wanted to do them at slightly different times so that you wouldn't be doing exactly the same kind of stuff. But also recognising that across all the different organisations, we all have different bits of knowledge and expertise that we can share and that hopefully will be useful to each of you as artists in different ways. So this seems like a really good idea to bring in the artists. And Mishka, I'm going to sort of start with you. And do you want to give a brief introduction to your work and perhaps tell us about why you applied for this opportunity, and then we'll come to Emily.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start. This was 11 years ago in this space. It was my first. It wasn't my first. It was my 3rd solo show. It was curated by Karen Newman, and the show was called Precious Commodities. And basically, it was a collection of work that sort of tried to think about how photography could. How the genre, the idea of documentary photography could be expanded in the age of satellite imagery and digital imagery and found imagery and surveillance technologies and so on. And so what you're looking at here, although it looks really abstract, it's actually an oil field in Texas, photographed from space. And the resolution, I'll just jump to my, I'm going to jump to my site. I'll just show you a few images from that series. Basically, what I was really interested in was the possibility that photography, as it exists today, allows us to see the world in a way that we've never seen before. So, for example, things like satellite images were for decades really restricted to government agencies, intelligence agencies, huge corporations, and so on. Whereas today, in the age of Google Earth, this imagery is available to everyone. So these are all oil fields. I wanted to start with a subject that was so massive that it's impossible to see on the ground, really, using conventional ways of visually representing things, either through photography or drawing or whatever. And so I chose the oil field because oil fields are these massive industrial infrastructures that are invisible on the ground, really, because they're so vast. And what I found is working with satellite imagery, it made it possible to see these places in detail and in ways that we'd never seen before. So this is a close-up of the field that I'd shown you in the previous image. So this is Kern River oil field in California. And so every black dot you can see there is a pump jack, either sucking oil out of the ground or pumping carbon dioxide into the ground to push the crude oil to the next pump jack. So anyway, this is something that I've been exploring. For the last 14 years, I would say, this idea of how can we see the world in a new way, really, in this sort of age of cameras being everywhere. This is a project I did called Landfall. These are catastrophic hurricanes, North Atlantic hurricanes that have all been retired. So hurricanes are all given names, you probably know. And when a hurricane is really devastating, they retire its name. So there will never be another Hurricane Katrina ever again. I think there is a Hurricane Lindsay. But she'll be back. She's not retired. And so what I did is I collected the sounds of the hurricanes being recorded either by journalists, storm chasers, radio phone-ins, and I would collect them for each hurricane and put them on a record, and there'd be a satellite image of the record of the hurricane on the record. And so as the disc spins, obviously the hurricane spins, but you get this kind of archive of devastation, really. But more importantly to me, how the culture represents the devastation. So you know, it's amazing how our civilization has so many complex and contradictory ways of recording events, and I find that really fascinating. With the Energy House, what fascinated me when I first heard about it, first one was, I can't believe this is on my doorstep. I mean, I literally live like 10 minutes away, and it's this sort of extraordinary, it's like a temple to an idea for me. The black box, I've got to say, Richard, I don't know if you chose the colour black, but for me the black box is incredible because it brought to mind straight away Mecca for a start, which is, you know, about faith. And the second thing, the black box that you have in an aircraft, right, that records the crash. And so I just found that sort of the idea that there is a black box on our doorstep that is an attempt to sort of contain all of the world's weather, all of the world's climate. I found like an extraordinary idea. And so, and I think it's an amazing metaphor really about where we are as a civilization, that we are trying to, you know, it's a simulation, right? You're creating a simulation. But the idea central to that is one that we're doomed in a way, potentially, that nature could consume us all if we don't figure out a way of surviving through this. And yeah, I think when I applied, I talked about the story of the three little pigs and the big bad wolf. So I sort of thought, in my mind, I was thinking of the Energy House as the house after the brick house, so the house of the future. And it always struck me, why don't you just build a massive energy house that we can all live within, and then you could just control the climate?
That
Right?
was feasibility stage 1.
Yeah. But I was thinking, yeah, there's so much, as a metaphor, it's so fascinating, and that really drew me into it, obviously, on top of the fact that it was an 18-month project. I mean, how often do you get to do that? And secondly, in my interview, I said that I wanted to use the university as a studio, effectively. So, you know, there's some really brilliant facilities at the university. As artists, you know, having access to facilities is really difficult. It's expensive. People aren't always willing to open their doors. And so, yeah, the chance to work with scientists, performers.
So perhaps we'll come on to that
Yeah.
in a little bit. I'm sort of thinking with the gloom and doom and the
Oh,
performers and
all
stuff
right,
that
yeah.
we talk about. But I think let's move on to Emily for a bit of an introduction to your work.
Okay.
And then we can find out a bit more about what you're actually doing at the moment.
Sure.
Because I know there's lots to talk about. So, Emily.
Great.
Sorry,
So,
shall
oh yeah, go on. Give us an
Hang on.
image. Oh, you
There we
missed some out there, Mishka. So I have been working as an artist for about 20 years or a bit more, and I guess like the thread that's gone through all the work has been like the relationship to architecture or built spaces, and I suppose the last 10 years I've been really interested in like power structures in built space and how that affects where we live, who gets to choose where we live, who gets to build, and the kind of, you know, it's tied up with class, it's tied up with gender, but there's it's kind of gone through lots of different iterations in different projects, but that's sort of the most like succinct I can be, I think. But yeah, this is a work called Flatland, which you might have seen in Tate Liverpool. I felt like it was there forever because it was lockdown time, so it stayed for a long time, which is great. But it's based on a novel by Edwin Abbott called Flatland, in which it's like a satire of Edwardian society. So kind of rather than thinking in like utopian or dystopian terms, it's quite hard to avoid like dystopian feelings right now, I think, as you've just alluded to, Mishka. But yeah, thinking about how to work with what we've got and what there is, and how to kind of change things by tiny like ways. And I worked with a few people on this project, but a lot of the thinking came from kind of like everyday things. And a lot of the words that are used to describe everyday, like ordinary, you know, they're often quite pejorative. Those words are something sort of bad about the everyday. But yeah, so it's kind of developing this very like tender community of women who might live in a different way, and they take a very bare structure and kind of dress it and change it and move it during the film. Do you want to move it on? Do the next.
Keep going.
Yeah. So then I've just put in a couple of different works because things just shift massively in terms of materials for me. And I think this is a really key work because I think it was 2018, I'm not sure, but it's called Innards, and it was a work for Knoll House, the National Trust. And it was about Victoria Sackville West and Vita Sackville West and the kind of family dynamics of these women in this house. But was also like a project that was quite a long making process, like 18 months or so, making these tiles and making this work, and then it all kind of went in a skip after 6 months. We were just talking about this earlier, how like this sort of sick feeling of throwing things away. So this kind of marked a point at which I really started questioning what I was making and how I was making. And I suppose when you're working around like built environment or architecture, you know, the environment is kind of a huge concern, but I may be coming at it from an adjacent point of view. But yeah, so thinking of for the Tate show, I'd make a film, and that would be really easy to move. And then I made the structure and the costumes. Yeah, and I think there's one more work, which yeah. So this is a recent work that's been in Drawing Room in London, and it's kind of after a couple of years of learning to work with cob and lime plasters and pigmented plasters, and using lots of natural building techniques and helping a couple of people build cob houses. And then it coming into the sculpture. So making objects again, but in a very like car-sized way. Yeah.
And so what attracted you to this particular opportunity?
So yeah, I saw the first one and was really bummed out that it was for photographers, because it was quite a specific call out, wasn't it? So yeah, when the second one came round, you know, there's some things that you just have this feeling about where you just it's kind of like, it's mine, I have to have that. And I just thought it was such an incredible facility, but then also I'm really interested in architectural models and scale, and I think there's something kind of amazing about this one-to-one architectural model scale house, because I think it is an architectural model as well as lots of other things, but we can disagree about that later maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it kind of seems like an architectural model at one-to-one scale to me, and that's got this really magical quality about it. So I really wanted to think about how, you know, the work for Flatland had been like, how will we live in the future? How will we change the communities we're living in or the places we're living in? And this all kind of just really seemed to tie in together. So yeah, it was just something that I really, really wanted to do.
And I think, sort of talking about that, it was an open call process for both, one being photography related and one being not photography, was kind of the description, I think. It was a really competitive process. I think we were blown away by how many applications we had, and actually even at interview stage it was really hard. I mean, Gas was on the interview panel and Sarah, but I don't know, Richard, is there anything you want to say about that process from your perspective?
Yeah, it was difficult because we had some kind of world-class artists that were absolutely fantastic, alongside some people who hadn't done a great deal of stuff, which was also great as well. So that's a difficult decision to sometimes make as well. But I think, and I'm not a specialist in art by anyone's standards, you know, and I never have been, and I never claim to be. But so that's why I have to take the guidance of the people around me on the panel. But I think I can see the energy side of things, and I hopefully can see if someone may be able to get the message out of what we're trying to do. But it wouldn't work without everyone at the table, I don't think. And it was a difficult process. I found it quite trying, actually, because you're torn between lots and lots of really good people, and I found it a really difficult process to go through.
Yeah, it was hard. It was.
Well, you did choose the best.
We chose the best, clearly. So talking about the best, Mishka, I mean, obviously you've been in post for 12 months now, so do you want to talk through a bit more about where you're up to and where your research has taken you?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I spent quite a bit of time with Richard. He was showing me through the facility, and he introduced me to members of his team and the work they did. And he told me about his background, which I found absolutely fascinating. Really interesting story about how he got to the energy house, but I won't tell it for him. And I also had some really good conversations with Roger McKinley at the Media City campus. He runs like the digital art kind of new media school.
I can't remember what his title is.
And I had this, every time I heard the words energy house, I just kept thinking about an energy house party. And it just made so much sense, even though it didn't necessarily have anything to do with anything. But I just thought, oh my God, this is like an open goal. Let's do an energy house party. And then I started thinking about what could we do as an energy, what would it look like to do an energy house party in this weird house that is within a house kind of thing, and but also in which you can control the climate, and so I had all sorts of ideas really, and Richard was really on board. Well, all of you have really been on board with the idea of an energy house party, and so I've kind of kept that idea, but I wanted to focus down a lot more, and also it's not. The idea of having a rave in a 16 million quid building full of very expensive equipment and sensors, I think I could see Richard. Richard had a lot of hair before.
He was a little bit nervous.
Just the idea of that itself was, I think it was a bit too.
We could do it, but I think so. So the guy speaks to me on a regular basis, and every time he speaks to me, he's got another 15 ideas. So I knew that another one would come on at some point. So
right.
we can do it, but
I haven't given up on that.
No, we might still do it. But basically, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have a house party? And one of the things that Richard has, I don't even know if he's mentioned this, is one of the house is absolutely packed with sensors. And what it can do, it can basically measure all sorts of heat output and input and loss, and visualize it in amazing ways. In fact, should I show you that animation? So someone from Richard's team sent me this and sent me a series of JPEGs, and so I animated them. And what this shows you is the way in which heat travels through the structure, the building. And when Richard just described this to me in words, I thought it was absolutely fascinating, because it was almost like, I know Richard's coming at it from a very scientific point of view, but it made me think of spirits, and the way, and actually looking at it tonight, it's making me think of planetary conditions and the way in which oceans flow around the world, and the way in which the wind flows around the world. And so in a way, the energy house here becomes a sort of like a microcosm of an entire planet, which I think is really beautiful. And so the idea was, let's do an energy house party, and then let's measure the energy that's produced by everyone in dancing. So I've got 2 young kids, and when we're freezing at home, we just start dancing, and it's like the most basic way. It costs nothing. Right, to get warm, and I thought, why are we building these ridiculously sophisticated houses? Let's just dance. Right?
Could have saved 16 million.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I thought it's just a brilliant idea, an energy to turn something that is really serious, scientific, into just a kind of carnivalesque thing, right? In which also produces a different kind of energy. And anyway, we basically, I've drilled that down more and more, and where I'm at now is I wanted to, with the work that I do, I always like to try and find the most basic, simplified idea that reflects everything else. And I've come up with this idea of the conductor, and the idea is basically there will be a percussionist in the acoustic chamber at the university, which is another chamber, a different type of energy chamber that measures acoustics, and the percussionist will strike a drum each time a lightning strike occurs in the world, and the lightning strikes happen very, very often, so it's going to be an incredibly intense piece. But the data is collected from this website. So this is a German scientist that's installed lightning censored all around the world. He basically built an extremely cheap lightning sensor, and it's plugged into like a global network, and it collects data every time there's lightning strikes all over the world. There's thousands of them, and it's a remarkable project because it kind of does what Richard's doing with the Energy House in a way. It's another way of kind of condensing all of the world's climate into a single space. And so I thought, God, this to have a percussionist banging a drum is a sort of beautiful metaphor, a kind of really beautiful allegory to what to what the Energy House is doing, which is that for the first time in the history of our species, we're able to connect to these global phenomena in a way. I mean, that's insane, really, if you think about it. It's true of disasters. It's true of so many things, but climate as well. That suddenly, when we can know that a lightning strike has just occurred in Hawaii, here. I mean, that's insane, really. And so I really love the idea of this single performer channeling all of the world's lightning strikes just through a drum. So something really primal, something really basic, but that is ultimately connected to the globe. Yeah.
And that's going to be presented
on the 5th of May at Sounds from the Other City. And what I've done in the spirit of the rave culture of the 1990s, they used to produce membership cards for different raves. And so I've just mocked up a membership card for coming to the Energy. So it is going to be an Energy House party, but it's the conductor. This is the conductor. So there might be other Energy House parties, but yeah. So watch this space because you'll be able to, and there'll only be about 15 or 20 people allowed in each time during each performance. I think each performance will be around 10 minutes in an extraordinary acoustic chamber, and they'll happen throughout the day on the 5th of May in Salford at the university, and you're all welcome. Yeah.
But you'll have to book. This is something
You'll
we're
have to book,
working out the logistics of this at the moment.
It's going to be,
But it's going to be a really great experience, I think. And then we're looking at how we might also, not necessarily record it, but sort of have a
graphic score. So I want to create a graphic score of the performance so that in a way, and publish it as such, so that it becomes a record of a very unique climatic moment in time that can be performed again later on if anyone ever wanted to.
I think what's been really interesting is talking about collaboration. This has absolutely become a collaboration across different departments of the university, but also with the festival, Sounds from the Other City. So it's becoming part of other things across the city. And then I suppose ultimately there will be some sort of presentation at Castlefield, which we will work out next year, 2025. Yeah. But perhaps now, I mean, Emily, do you want to talk a bit more about your research and the process? Sure. And obviously you're at an earlier stage, but
it's quite weird when Mishka's so what's the word? Like it's kind of so coherent, but it sounds great. I can't wait to see it. So I think it's interesting doing a residency like this because at first, when you go in the house or you see all the kind of the science, as it were, like the room upstairs where you have all the screens with all the data coming through it's like, the really overwhelming amount of information. But yeah, there's a kind of like a little battle that I have, I think, in that you don't have to be a scientist, you don't have to be an architect, you could just be an artist. So it's kind of remembering what you bring to something is quite key at the beginning stages, I think. And also the 18-month thing is really unusual in a residency. So that's been something that I've really been enjoying and luxuriating in research. So I haven't seen you much yet, but you will see me more very soon. But yeah, I've been really looking into lots of things, but then honing in on the kitchen. And just kind of thinking about spaces in which, we all have to kind of like do our bit for the environment, but it's really interesting that, the kitchen to me feels like a space that is very at the whim of kind of fashion and very like fashion cycles and kind of like this very capitalist consume and produce model in that it's the only thing that's really changed properly about the kitchen for the last sort of 100 years is the surface or how it looks. And you get all like really nice fancy gadgets and islands and things now, but they're very much like for a middle class sort of, or upper middle class household. So I'm kind of really interested in this as a space in that maybe it's been used in a certain way for lots and lots of reasons. That's like a whole talk in itself maybe. So I've been going to see lots of kitchens, which has been amazing, and just, yeah, I've gone down a rabbit hole of the history of kitchens, which I need to come out of. This is the Comran book from like the 70s, I think. But yeah, so just really thinking about that space and how it's used, and then kind of, I don't know what will come out of it. I've been kind of developing a few ideas, and annoyingly, several of them involve like performance and other, you know, things that are quite big. So yeah, it's great that there's performance students and dance students at the university. Let's see what happens. But yeah, then also lots of work in the past is kind of like every few years there's kind of like an architectural cake that pops up somewhere. And it's been like a device in a way that I've found really useful for starting conversations about like difficult buildings or difficult spaces, or just kind of something as a focus. So yeah, can I use the kitchen at the Energy House? Can I cook?
Yeah, it's all yours.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there might
It's
be
a
some
fully-
cake.
So the important thing about the houses as well is that the two houses that you see in there aren't just shells and stuff. They're full houses. People do live in them, have lived in them. The building regulations process for that's probably the reason why I have no hair, Mishka, is to build a house inside a chamber, inside a locked building, inside a locked campus, where it's also windy, it's snowing, and icy, and could set on fire, is a huge piece of regulation. But yeah, it's all signed off, and people do live in the house, stay overnight, and yeah, do whatever you like.
Okay, so yeah, it would
to
also be
tidy
great.
up after.
Yeah, of course. I'm a good washer.
Yeah, that's
Is there a dishwasher?
there is a dishwasher. Yes, there is. Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be really good to think about food and the kitchen in terms of like inviting people in for conversations, and developing that a little bit more. So there's kind of like several threads going off in different directions, and I like the fact that I don't have to decide yet. It's a nice position to be in. But yeah.
So I think it's sort of interesting just sort of building on that, because so both Mishka and Emily are kind of wanting to do things in the house. And is that a surprise to you, Richard?
No, that's kind of what I wanted. The houses are very ordinary houses. They're low carbon houses, but you guys have all been in them, and they're just the same as any other new house that you would see on any housing estate. That they are a very typical starter home offered by a mass house builder. That they've got heat pumps in, they've got solar PV in, they've got batteries up in the loft and things like that. But you wouldn't really know the difference between that and the typical starter home on any kind of new build housing estate. It's that they are there to be used. Yes, we do have hundreds, well, we've probably got about 1,000 sensors in the two houses. At the end of our kind of physics research comes the next stage, which will probably be the back end of the year, where people live in those homes, and we see exactly how they operate the controls and the electric vehicle charging, and how they manage their energy, and how they set the heating, and you know what type of ventilation system they got on with, and which was the best shower that they felt most comfortable in, all this. So there's a big human piece to all this as well. Now, I'm not a huge fan of kind of working with people, as I'm sure Lindsay will tell you, but I can cope with some people in the houses. But generally, as physicists, we like to control everything. So what we will do is we'll control the weather, and we'll control all the measurements, and we'll kind of give them some indicators of what we're looking to do. But otherwise, it's you go in, you live in there, and knock yourselves out.
You also had something I found fascinating that you haven't mentioned is the Afghan tent, the Afghan refugee tent.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about,
I can, yeah.
tell everyone a bit about that?
So you've only seen Chamber 1. Chamber 2 is more of an adventure playground for building physicists at the moment. So we have a brand new type of house that's never been built before. So it's built of light gauge steel, and and it's got insulation out of the graphene centre over at Manchester University, so that they've kind of put product into that. And it's a spin out of the graphene centre of the building. Then next to that, we're looking at windows, and I won't bore you with the history of my research, but a lot of it is around curtains, which is what I thought this might be. This is great. Analogy for energy savings, because they curtains save energy. So we can look at things like that. And the bit that Mishka has mentioned earlier is we are working with a young product developer out of Loughborough University. The first product that she's developed, and it's great. It's when people live on refugee camps, they get issued a tent by the UN, and it's a very standard tent. Ours was shipped in from India, freshly kind of made, and it's exactly the same as a refugee would be living in. And she tells me the average time that someone would live in one of these tents, a family of 4 or 5, is 12 years. 12 years in a tent. And they heat them with kerosene, which is just mind-numbingly dangerous. Or they light fires outside and then bring them inside at night. Again, just crazy dangerous. So she has a product that uses solar panels and a small battery inside. So the panels charge a battery during the day, or they have a microgrid or something on the camp. That gives them access to light and power for charging wireless hotspots and phones and things like that, because people need to communicate all the time these days. But also it charges a heating mat that the family can sleep on. Otherwise they're sleeping on cold floors, and it's like an infrared carbon reinforced heating mat, which is obviously infinitely safer than dragging in hot coals or burning kerosene. So yeah, it's projects like that kind of fit nicely with, you've got the mass house builders on the left-hand chamber, then you've got the kind of the real other problems that we've got going on in the planet in the other chamber, and a really kind of air of excitement in there. So yeah, it is a bit of a mixed bunch. The houses are the things that often get the attention, but most people stop and think about the tent for a while.
Yeah, it's really crazy to enter that chamber and just see, because the chambers are massive, aren't they? They're way bigger than this space. Yeah. And just in the middle of this chamber, you have this one, like, tent, canvas tent, yeah.
It's pretty depressing.
Well, it's just an amazing juxtaposition, isn't it? Yeah. A Barratt home and a UN refugee tent. Anyway. Just thought I'd mention it because
it's an interesting side of what we do,
amazing.
and doing the right thing by the right people is a big part of what we all should do, really. And that no one's paying for that experiment to be done. They're coming in, and she's had a first initial order for 10,000 of these units to go out into a field trial.
She should partner with Barratt Homes. Barratt Homes should do the refugee tents, couldn't they?
There's probably a discussion to be had, but the aid industry is a huge industry.
Yeah. No,
and I like to see research going on while people are spending huge amounts of charity money going to people who are really struggling. I'd rather it was the right stuff going into the right places. So yeah, we're really chuffed with that. It's good.
I mean, this seems sort of quite a good point to open up to the audience if there are any questions anyone wants to ask. I mean, I've got plenty I can keep going with, but go on, gas straight in there.
Just a little back to this sort of doom and gloom thing, and I guess a lot of institutions, organisations, there's some pressure on us to think about how we're communicating to audiences, and there's a lot of talk these days about climate anxiety and different people being very kind of concerned about upsetting people by talking about climate change. Obviously, we need to talk about it. It's very important. What do you think about that dynamic as artists and Rich? We're with you. Let's communicate this and talk about it. But how do you feel about this sort of worry of upsetting people?
So is the question there about, I mean, it is about what is your role as artist in engaging the public in climate change, and do you worry about upsetting people in the process?
Yeah, so
I'm looking at this work on the wall.
Yeah, I don't what I'm about to say sounds ridiculous, but I don't have a doom and gloom view to it at all. I think what is interesting is, I look at it everything is constructed. Everything is a social construct and a cultural construct. Everything. So I see it as, you know, I mention it in that little video piece that I did there. When in the past, when we thought about climatic events, we saw it as the work of the gods, whereas now we see it as the consequences of our actions. And I think that's maybe just a civilizationary phase. You know what I mean? That's how we see the world, as our, you know, we don't believe in gods anymore. We just believe in our own actions, and so our job is to try and figure out how to change our behaviour. Whereas in the past, maybe it would have been how to be better, more moral, live more moral lives, so as not to incur the wrath of the gods. So I sort of see it as like it's all material, really, with which to think, to make work. So this piece here, for example, you know, and I find AI fascinating because AI is like a mirror. It's kind of like a perfect mirror to our civilization in a way. That's all it is. I think of AI as just a mirror. And so this is like the origin to this image was a news photograph, and I, you know, it made me think of Caspar David Friedrich, and I think the history of art is fascinating because the history of art really is a history of how we've seen the world and how we've thought of the world, and so I think it's all interrelated. So for me, it's not doom and gloom at all. It's just another challenge that as a species we have to face. And I sort of think as a species, we've never, ever been better off, ever. Fewer children die now than they ever have done. Fewer people live in poverty than they ever have done. And there are wars happening, but there's fewer wars than there's ever been. You know, it's a media spectacle, I think. And in a way, all of my work tries to confront the media spectacle and sort of try and talk about that rather than anything else in a way. Does that make sense?
Good answer.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, how about you?
I guess I was just thinking that it is sort of tied up with morality in a way, because the discomfort of people maybe being offended is because they don't want to think about it, or it's difficult. So yeah, there is kind of maybe something there about feeling judged, which seems to tie into what you're saying about, yeah, you were saying something different, but the word morality kind of stuck with me. But yeah, no, I never worry about it, I guess, because the kind of work I make is not totally, what's the word? Yeah, it's kind of not that direct, or yeah. There is a good word, but it's not here. It's just gone, yeah.
It's late.
Yeah.
Mishka's had something to eat, we haven't, so there's that to think about. I'm just wondering, Mishka, because my battery's going to die, but whether you wanted to show a couple of your AI images, other images to the audience before the battery goes, or not?
No.
Okay.
We can talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking. That was a good question, Gas. Is anybody else? Sarah's the hand straight up there, and then somebody over here.
Well, I was just wondering, because this is a research residency, it is slightly different to many residencies. You know, the longevity is to do with the fact that you're engaging with research, and obviously Richard's been researching for over a decade now, this arena, and I'm quite interested to think about how artists operate, and perhaps also what the kind of, you know, how you feel about operating with scientists where actually research is quite different in a way, because there's a kind of right and wrong, isn't there, for you, Richard?
Mm-hmm.
And for artists there's interpretations of and different ways of going and thinking. So I'd be quite interested in how you kind of feel about working with each other in terms of the different kinds of research goals, and how you kind of thought about that as you've been thinking about the residency and what you're doing.
Yeah, it's funny, really. I think there's a lot in common because, like, the good scientists are really open-minded, and You know, good scientists do not have the attitude that they hold the truth. Quite the opposite. You know, they're constantly investigating and open to new sort of
They're trying to find answers, aren't they? They're trying to find.
Yeah, and we're trying to find questions, right? So I feel like it's not that different in a way. I know the few times I've gone into the nerve centre where all the screens are, where all the data's coming in, and I went in once and I was looking at it and it looked like a tube map, and I think I said that to Richard, and he just went, "Do you know, I've never looked at that and thought that looks like a tube map. That's kind of amazing." And I thought that was a really interesting moment, because it's like, as artists, because I'm ignorant of the science, you know, I see something else that Richard doesn't see. But actually, they're kind of connected, aren't they? Because the way whoever made those graphic decisions about what colours to use and what shapes and line to use, probably had in their unconscious the London tube map. So all these things are kind of related. I think that, you know, there is a code to our culture that will inform, like a visual code and a cognitive code that will inform how scientists exhibit and present data, isn't there? It doesn't exist completely in isolation to the rest of the culture. And our job as artists is kind of to delve into that sort of cultural DNA, I think, and to sort of explore, like, you know, it's really interesting to think about the kitchen. I would never have thought about the kitchen, but when you think about it, yeah, the kitchen is so loaded. It's such a particular space in a house, and it has so many cultural codes embedded in it. And Richard might not even have thought about it. I haven't thought about it, and yet it's the best place at the party, yeah. Yes. So, yeah. And it's just having, to be able to sit down with Richard and having a conversation about, like, even magic, you know, things. You realise there's so many interesting crossovers. Yeah.
But we do have, like, the luxury of less accountability, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, that's quite joyous as an artist, to be able to put things together that don't need to do that job, or, you know, do a different job. Sorry, Sarah, you. John.
I know, is anyone writing about this? Anything incredible? I mean, in terms of cultural theory, rather than at the university, rather than within the scientific.
Not yet.
Because it just got me thinking loads about Buckminster Fuller's geodesic domes and the spaceship Earth, you know, the kind of like 60s, the countercultural dome, the refugee tent, the Disney theme park, the World Fair, having the Sparrow Home and the UN refugee tent. It's quite powerful. And I'm afraid I don't share quite your beautiful optimism at the moment. It feels pretty dystopian. There's something kind of fascinating about that, I guess. And I also had a question as someone who's really regretting having installed loads of blinds instead of curtains. Like you're saying, like, that's a real key, like, utopian vision of the future, is that we should all have really thick, big curtains.
So,
you know you want to answer this question. I was going to finish with the curtain question, so come on.
I spent 12 years researching curtains, and my boss always kind of relentlessly kind of complains about it. But so the story about curtains is about 50% of us use them, 50% don't use them, which I think is an interesting thing anyway. Some European countries use them far less. Some people use them far more. Some people use them for privacy. Some people use them for comfort. My angle is around thermal comfort and energy savings. So if you take a typical blind, for instance, 15% energy saving compared to not using a blind. Curtains can be, if it's on top of a radiator, for instance, 38% of the heat transfer will be taken away from that curtain.
And Richard, what about the direction of the slats on the
blind?
No, seriously, listen to this.
The way that you close a blind, there's about 2 or 3% difference between shutting it one way or the other. It's like a Venetian blind.
Which is
going
better?
It's best to point the heat away from the window, so that way. And that blocks out light better as well. So, but no one has ever done that research. So you know, some people do kind of think it's a bit soft, but there are things we have that can save energy, the same with carpets and all the other kind of things that no one gives any kind of credit for. But it's not about that. It's about the fact that I can talk about retrofitting buildings all day long, and I can talk about the new builds and everything else. The fact is, many people don't have the money to do these things. And the government doesn't seem to be that forthcoming with money for that. So to me, it's about educating people, and I'm definitely going to mention this because this is the big piece of research that we did. It's about giving people the skills. Sounds like a Beastie Boys song. There's the skills to reduce the bills. It's putting some information that's really basic. So you take your combi boiler at home and you turn the heating flow down from 74, which is what it comes out of the box at, down to about 62. Your building's still going to heat up, but you're going to save about 9 or 10% of your heating bill. You can go and do that now, okay? And yeah, that was on at one point last Christmas. That was on about made up number of percentage of every bus stop in the UK, because the government used it as their key message, our research that we put out. And it's things like that you can discover by using chambers. And yeah, I let's not go into the whole kind of climate change thing. We know it's happening and we've got to do stuff about it, but also we've got to do stuff about helping people live their lives and saving money and not just wasting energy and causing even further climate change. So to do the small things is what we're all about as well. We can't all just go and buy a new house or retrofit the entire thing, but when we give out advice, and this is why we need relationships with the arts and cultural sector, because I can talk to you guys, which is great, and I can talk to academics, but I can't talk to everyone. And it's a simple message to get out that could be done in many different ways. And it's about getting that message out to someone who doesn't engage with reading the BBC News, or doesn't engage in reading The Guardian. All of these outlets we get featured on pretty much weekly. It's someone who doesn't necessarily pick those things up. So how do we get this message across to everyone rather than just select people that may or may not even need that guidance? So that to me is why we do these things. And I don't know how I got onto that from curtains, but anyway, it is what it is.
Simple energy saving.
Simple stuff, yeah.
And it's about caring and about making a difference.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So there was a question over here before, so from
I'm
Super.
going to take complete self-interest in this question from the photography programme at Salford. And you talked earlier that Mishka was the photography commission and we're in a photography gallery, and you talked a little bit about there's still some thinking around how you maybe document or record or somehow visually present these events, if that's even part of what you want to do. But is there any kind of thinking that there might be some kind of photographic output or photographic process through any of these house parties or whatever that you're doing?
Yeah, so one idea is to actually create a digital avatar of this percussionist and create so using like the 3D modelling facilities that they have at the university in the Media City campus, and having this percussionist exist online permanently, banging a drum every time there's a lightning strike. I mean, it'd be the most awful website to visit. But it was a concern actually of mine. I approached Lindsay about, because it was a photography commission, and you had McCoy and Windu, some really great documentation. So there was no point me coming in and doing more documentation. It's more just thinking about visually. And interestingly, actually, what I think is really interesting that's happened in the last year is that the AI models have become so sophisticated that actually the whole conversation of photography, I think, has changed just radically in the last 12 months about what photography is anymore in relation to AI, which I think is a fascinating subject. And for me, the combination of, I think it's an amazing moment that we're in, because the crisis of painting resulted in photography, and the crisis of photography, I think, has resulted in AI. And it's almost gone full circle. It's as if now photography is informed as much by digital painting, which is informed by art history, as at any other time in history. So it's a really fascinating moment for photography itself, I think. But yeah, in terms of the digital way of capturing a performer, and then how you might translate that into into an online environment, I think would be fascinating. But it's quite an ambitious thing to do. It's not.
This is, I mean, as Richard said, Mishka, every time you speak to him, there's about 15 other ideas, which are all great, and it's trying to sort of.
And I'm just trying to stay focused on what and do
Yeah.
one thing. I'm just trying to do one simple thing well. It's not, and that's hard enough. Yeah.
But we will.
Oh yeah.
And because there will be, I mean, you know, there is, as part of the commission, there is also the exhibition to consider at Castlefield Gallery, so there will be something, just reminding you, and something for the collection at the end of the day, because this is ultimately, you know, that's what we want, is something for the University Art Collection that is a legacy of this residency programme, and we'll talk to future generations about what we've done and about the work that Richard and the team are doing. That's really important to us. So we do have to think about that a bit more.
Back on the research thing, so just thinking about Mishka and how you've developed the work, so I think the interesting thing with the research residency is that you can go through iterations. You know, it does allow, and I know with McCoy Wynne, the ideas developed over time, and you know, bringing in nature and the different way that you ended up creating images in that weren't actually there as well. So bringing in digital imagery and morphing that with actual space. I think just going back to this idea of the research residency, and just because we're in the climate lab, where there's a lot of people that are looking at different ways of working with imagery and a lot of groups coming into the lab, I'm interested in that process and enabling more visibility for that process, because I think that's what artists do incredibly well, and often actually final exhibitions can lose so much that's gone on, whether it's successful as a finished piece or not. Actually, that thinking, you know, I'm really interested in how we get to a stage where that thinking and the process of research becomes visible and shared, and it's kind of that, you know, we've become this world where actually the value of the object has meant that many artists are reluctant to talk through the things that perhaps have gone off piece. Because it's become about the commodity of the final thing. I think what's been really interesting with all of the research residencies that we've done is that actually those conversations about the creative process, the thinking, it feels to me like, you know, maybe if we were to reinvent art for the 21st century, it would be more about those processes of thinking, of trying, of changing direction, and less about the commodity. I'm sorry, you've got a collection, but it's how do you collect that process as well, isn't it?
But I think that's something we are very interested in, and kind of my colleague Rowan at the front here, we are putting together sort of well, what we want is to record some of this process in different ways, so whether that's through podcasts or videos or through writing. And I know, Emily, you've been sort of pulling together bits of information for us, so it's not live yet, but it will be.
Yeah. I've been collecting interviews and kind of site visits and lots of things, and writing a bit, so it will go online at some point.
At some point, we're working on that at the moment, but it's that process, because I mean, you know, what we're doing now, I mean, to be honest, is informed by McCoy Wynne and your residency, and actually that length of time, I think, and needing that. Certainly, you know, my experience of working with you has fed into developing this. And it is sort of wanting to record all of that, I guess, and that whole process, and actually, you know, what we get at the end of the collection, it'll be a thing, but it is the story of the whole process that is actually really important, because otherwise it's just a thing. And, you know, that's really what's important to us. So all the material that we're collecting around this becomes part of the archive and around that artwork. So it is all about storytelling, not just having a thing.
I mean, it's dependent on a huge a big project budget, but the Hakeve's Whole Life Academy and related new alphabet project was really innovative in terms of like a long-lasting online mapping of repository and archive with visual material and multiple, and that involved lots of sort of residencies and the Magic Art School and ongoing reading groups, and it was a really, I mean, what's really sad as an academic with a lot of these things is like websites attached to projects they have a shelf life, so they die with the artistic project if the funding was, you know, so long.
I think HKB had a hell of a lot of federal funding and an army of wissenschaftliche Mitarbeiterinnen to do those kind of projects, but so I don't know how realistic it is, but I think it's, yeah, absolutely kind of an important part of And I just want to say, Emily, as well, like maybe, I mean, I'm sure you've already gone there, but like Cold War kitchens are so interesting. Like the kitchen
Got an amazing
bays
book on the
and all the crazy world fairs with, because that kind of sits with geodesic dome, but like, yeah, Khrushchev and Nixon arguing over like vacuum cleaners and
we should have, maybe I can interview you for my blog.
Sounds like a good idea.
You're volunteering.
There's another question, I think.
Yeah,
Liz?
not to give any of you more work to do, but I was just wondering, are you tracking or interested in tracking your own carbon footprint of the residency itself and the outputs that you make, whether they're physical or digital or long-term in production, given the context of the subject?
So I can pick up on that, and I'm going to hand it to people right in front of you. Do you mind elaborating, guys, on what you did?
Well, we tried.
Yeah, it was.
We tried very hard to actually work out, what our carbon footprint was in,
down to the digital exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So we took images digitally and tried to calculate what each exposure, what the expenditure, what it was.
Charging the battery with digital camera,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to maybe using analog.
Mm-hmm.
It would be better to use our old equipment and use film
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to
So
new digital. So it was,
it's what the carbon footprint is, the construction of every element of the camera is, and that has to be calculated into every time it's used, and what is the life of the battery and every time it's recharged. And the sums were too much for us. It was beyond. It was
impossible to calculate really down to.
And it was too difficult for us to do. So we actually knew someone who's an engineer who actually did the calculations for us as near as he could.
Yeah.
But even that, it's like you can go on and on and on and on.
It's like using the car to get to.
All
those things.
Yeah.
And then you have to find out every single component of the vehicle. What is the carbon within that vehicle?
Yes, you don't want it to get to the stage where you're like, oh, there's just no point in doing it.
But then you just have to sort of say, well, it's so off.
I think what it made us aware of is how difficult it actually is to calculate. And when you come across, I don't know, a building firm say, well, we're building these houses, we'll plant 20 trees to offset our carbon footprint.
And it's
that's just nonsense.
difficult to figure out the air. They're just, but you think to yourself, but everybody just has to try. It's that one of those you just think, well, everybody.
The small things.
The small things. So you're always trying your best because it's so difficult to calculate. You're trying to find your best to make sure that you're not expending too much carbon.
I think sustainability is obviously at the heart of everything I do, and we advocate the best use of the things we have. So like Steph and Steve were saying then, the journeys to and from, we try and build meetings and we do meetings online, and we'd always do it the best way we could. Trying to calculate it all is far more complicated, as the guys just alluded to, than people think it is. But I think that all of us have a responsibility to kind of do things in a more sustainable way. I get invited to do podcasts down in London and stuff like that. I just refuse to do it because I can just do it online. But it's come down to our studio, and I'm not interested. So the fact is that the arts are no different to what the building sector is. And I think we can do a lot of this stuff remotely. And, Steph and Steve had to come to the site and take pictures of various different things. And Mishka's using the facilities, and Emily will be doing the same. But I think if we can centralise the stuff we do, so he doesn't have to go and build a studio, he uses the one that the students aren't using for that day, and Emily does the same. There's more to it than kind of just shutting your curtains. That you've kind of got to use what's already there as well. And we did a project. Can I talk about what we did with Omid?
Yeah.
So we did a project with what's Omid's surname? Asadi. Omid is a. Gas can talk about this. It's your project. You do it.
So we had a solo show. The last show we had was a solo show by a guy called Omid Asadi, who's a Manchester-based artist, and it was great having Rich on hand to give us a bit of advice, because what done this, so we asked how do we do this, and you kind of helped us source some bricks, and so one of the things that we managed to do was buy some bricks from a reclamation yard, Lomax Reclamation in Rochdale, if you're interested. Very helpful. And then we built the work, and then just about a week ago, with Casey's help, we dismantled this brick wall, and the bricks have now gone back to the same reclamation yard in Rochdale, which is just around the back of Richard's
So the bricks are 100 years old. They'd already been used once in one house, knocked down, saved, cleaned up, sold to gas and